I would like to call the board meeting for Tuesday, February 18th for the Des Moines Public Schools to order. Please take the roll.
Miss Anderson,
Here.
Mr. Barron,
Here.
Miss Bradley,
Here.
Mr. Cody,
Here.
Miss Delagardelle,
Here.
Miss Sawyer,
Here.
Miss Caldwell Johnson.
Here.
If I could please ask as you exit, if you would kindly turn off your voices. Thank you. The first item of business is the approval of our agenda. May I have a motion and a second to approve our agenda?
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion by Barron and a second by Bradley. Please vote. Motion passes 7-0. The next item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes for Tuesday, February 4th, 2020. May I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes?
Move approval.
Second. We have a motion by Caldwell Johnson and a second by Anderson. Please vote.
Didn't I abstain?
Oh,
I wasn't here.
sorry, I wasn't reading down correctly. The vote passes 6-0-1. Next up, we have district recognitions, and I will turn this over to Dr. Ahart.
Good evening, Board. We are fortunate to have many partners throughout the community who support our students and our schools in both big and small ways. Two of those who are our biggest supporters are with us tonight, Polk County and Prairie Meadows. In recent years, their financial support has been a big help to improve and strengthen our technology network across the district. Tonight, it's a pleasure to welcome some very special guests for this year's check presentation. I'd like to invite Polk County Supervisors Angela Connolly, Tom Hawkinsmith, and Matt McCoy, along with Julie Stewart from Prairie Meadows, to please come forward to say a few words about their support of our public schools in Des Moines. Ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. I'm Julie Stewart, Director of Community Relations for Prairie Meadows. I'm happy to present tonight. Prairie Meadows and Polk County have had a great partnership, and we're going on our 31st year, so it's hard to believe it's been that long. But part of this great partnership is we give back a percentage of our net receipts back to the students of Polk County. And so from our 2019 net receipts, we're committed back $1.2 million to Polk County students. And tonight, we'll present a check for $517,000 to the Des Moines School District. And what's great about these funds is these funds are unrestricted, so that allows the Des Moines School District to identify where you have the greatest needs, and you can use those funds how you see fit. So I'd like to turn it over to the supervisors now.
Well, again, thank you very much for this partnership that we've had over the number of years. We know that you have very difficult decisions to make, and tonight was evidence of that. And to the extent that we can help with these resources, we're proud to partner with you and proud of the work that you do in our community every single year. So thank you very much, and I believe that I actually have a check for you, the actual check, and I think we'll...
I can't remember, this might be my 20th year presenting a check to Des Moines Public Schools, and we're happy to do it. I know that you guys put it to great use, and we're happy to help all the citizens and the students of Polk County, and I'm happy that I know that you'll put it to good use. And tonight was an evidence that we all have to make tough decisions as we sit around these tables. So thank you for what you do. It's not easy, and sometimes it's thankless. So I know where you sit, but I know you do the best you can for the students. So thank you for what you do, and it's a pleasure allowing almost a little over $500,000 back to the school. So you do great work. Thanks.
I don't know of anything that really hasn't been said, except I'd like to add that, you know, a lot of times we don't talk enough about how important our relationship is. When I say our relationship, Polk County's relationship is with Prairie Meadows Racetrack Casino. and how beneficial it is to this community and for Central Iowa. So this is just another example of how that relationship gives back, and all of that revenue generated out there goes back into this community, and it's a great partnership, and I certainly appreciate that we have that with them.
Thank you.
Where should we be? Where do you want us to be for the photo? What, with you guys?
Are they gonna get in?
Okay.
Awkward lady and.
Thank you very much.
There you go, you can have the fake one too.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
The next item on our agenda is the consent items. We allow any person the opportunity to speak to the board for up to 5 minutes following the presentation of an agenda item. If anyone wishes to speak to an agenda item, please go to the information desk to sign up. Remarks must be germane to the agenda, and we ask that you avoid references to personalities and character attacks, as those types of comments serve no productive purpose. We appreciate your input. As a reminder to the board and public, the board will not engage in discussion or deliberation with a speaker regarding comments made to agenda items. Discussion and deliberation will remain among board members at the board table, with speakers' comments informing said discussion, deliberation, and determinations as deemed necessary. Mr. Barron, I believe you have the consent motion.
I do. I move that the board approve the consent items in accordance with the recommended action for each item on the consent agenda, including bills previously authorized, certified, and approved for payment by the board secretary in the amount of $4,844,005.35.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Barron and a second by Caldwell Johnson. As a reminder to the board and public, our consent agenda contains, our consent motion contains contracts, payments, awards for contracts, transition of SCAVO from school to a program, a financial conditions monitoring report, and other board business. We have one signed up speaker on this agenda item. If there are any other additional speakers, please make sure you make your way over to our information table to sign up. Renee Daggett. Renee? Renee? Okay. Are there any discussion or questions that board members have regarding this agenda item? Okay. Please vote. The consent items are approved 7-0. The next item on our agenda is item F1, monitoring report, all students third grade reading. I will now turn it over to Dr. Ahart for our presentation.
Happened to the Star Wars mouse.
They gave us something we could handle.
Good evening, board. We are here with our second report on the first two SMART goals, the all students third grade reading and the black males third grade reading. The reason there's two monitoring reports tonight was really a matter of scheduling. We are trying to report on each of the SMART goals at least 4 times a year. The schedule gets a bit compressed after the beginning of the year because we just don't have fresh data until after the first testing in the fall. And in order to get a full cycle through without compressing later on, we thought these were the two that were best suited to be presented together because there's some duplicative data in these two reports. So with me this evening is our Executive Director of of Curriculum and Instruction, Noelle Nelson, and our Elementary Director of Teaching and Learning, Kelly Schofield. You've met both of these folks previously. And we have two reports tonight, the All Students Third Grade Reading Report and the Black Males Third Grade Reading Report. We have some encouraging news, I think. But as you all understand, these are very aggressive SMART goals, aggressive for very good reason. We have a lot of work to do, but I think there's some good evidence here tonight that we're on the right track. So with that, I will turn things over to Noelle and Kelly.
Great, thank you. I just want to take a moment before we dig into the data to acknowledge the really hard work that's happening in our schools every day. We're not where we want to be, but we're seeing some really exciting gains. And so I think we're getting some traction in lieu of these new goals. We're seeing some evidence of some very tangible and real progress, especially when we look at trend over time. And I look at the passion that showed up to the room tonight and the energy and the excitement, and I think we will have arrived when we see that same level of energy and excitement around student outcomes. So we're really excited to present the first piece of evidence that we're seeing some really strong gains. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kelly. Whoops, sorry, Kelly.
Good evening. As you know the board goals very well, as I stated before, I like to read them just to bring them into the space. So board goal 1, the percent of all third grade students on track in reading will increase from 52% to 72% by June 2023 as measured by FAST. Board goal 2, the percent of Black male third grade students on track in reading will increase from 35% to 72% by June 2023 as measured by FAST. This is highlighting how those our targets are moving each year so that we can get to that 72% in both of those goal areas by spring of 2023. Just a reminder that this, the information that that we're going to share is also can be found on the data we're going to share can be found on the dashboard, the public-facing dashboard, which you can get to through this link, or you can get through our website by going to the board tab, and then you'll see that public link is there to see the data. All right, so now we're going to share some good news. It feels good to see some green on here. This is our third grade students meeting benchmark on fast reading. So it's the percent of our third grade students. We did highlight some year-over-year data here so that you could see some of the progress that we've made in our all student goal and our Black male goal. We met our target for winter 2020 for both of those goal areas, and as you can see, we're closing in on that spring one already, so we've made some significant progress in this area and for third graders. Also, on the monitoring, we monitor our kindergarten, first and second grade as well, so we're showing you that data. As you can see, our kindergarten students have students in both of these goal areas have met their winter target, but also have met their spring target now in the winter. So that was exciting news for us, and we've had, as you can see, significant growth over time. First grade, I've sat here many times talking about first grade. It's been an area that we have focused in our support on, and also really looking at that data and problem solving around it. And we can say that we've also made some significant improvements in our first grade in both of those goal areas. And I want to point out that from fall to winter in years past, we typically see a decrease in first grade. And we've talked about that as we've sat here several winter reports. We've lost ground in first grade, especially from fall to winter. So the fact that we made these improvements is really kind of taking into account that we didn't lose ground, but we also made some improvements. So
I do, Kelly. Sorry, I do want to remind the board and the broader community that the test changes as we move through the year. So it's not that if our percentage of success was, for instance, at 48% in the fall, and was at 58%, at 48% again in the winter, that progress wasn't made because the benchmark changes. So I just want to make sure people are clear on that it's a moving target. It's more difficult to move forward and keep that same percentage because the bar gets raised with each iteration of the test.
And you can see with our first graders, with our in our board goal around all students, that we've also met the spring target in that area. Second grade was, we did meet our target in our all goal, did not make the target for our black males in second grade for winter, and so that's an area that we really are looking into with those second grade students at the building level. I did want to highlight some other data as well. I know that if you look at our third grade, if we go back to our third grade data, that cohort of students made 8.83% gain from winter of their second grade year to winter of this year. So as a cohort, they've made gains as well for all students. And our black males gained 10% from winter of their second grade year, 2019, to winter 2020. We've also seen some significant gains in our for our ELL population, which is not on the board goal, but I did want to highlight it for collapsed K-3 from fall to winter. For our ELL students, we gained 8.83%, and from winter 2019 to winter 2020, we gained 10.18%. So we made some significant gains there. And with our students receiving specially designed instruction, again, I know it's not part of the board goals, but I do want to lift it up and highlight that from winter of 2019 to winter of 2020, we increased by 20%, so about 10%, which is significant in an area that we've really been working on. So I did want to raise that up as well.
So as you've been aware, we've been engaging with our community. I'm sorry, is there a question? We can stop for a question if, okay. No, she was just. Okay, we can come back to it if necessary. As you know, we've been engaging with our community, our schools, and various members through this collaborative problem-solving process. And through there, while it's not completed, some trends are absolutely emerging that we're able to grapple with. So through our early literacy one specifically, these were the areas of potential root causes that have actually been verified through this process with data. So I'm just going to walk you through them quickly and then hone in on a couple that we've already taken and run with. Implementation of a high-quality curriculum we know has been something that has been missing. Not that we haven't had curriculum, we've just been missing the high-quality part. So that's really something that we've been working to remedy with our adoption of EL, which we've talked about. Access to grade level instruction is also part of that curriculum adoption of making sure we're calibrated on when you say grade level and I say grade level, are we saying the same thing? And actually, how does that measure up against a national standard? Data-based assessment and decision-making, that's been validated. A large majority of our schools have self-reported through a self-assessment that is an area that they need more support in. They do not feel confident in taking data, analyzing data, and more importantly, making decisions. So that's been an area of focus, or will be an area of focus. Access to culturally responsive practices and access to diverse reading materials. We know that this is part of our equity work. We need to get a lot better at this. This is supported through this new curriculum adoption, but it doesn't stop there. So we know we're going to likely have to have some action plans around how to support that. Routines and systems to ensure students are not missing quality instructional time. This is really getting at management, classroom management, behavior management. How do we ensure access by kids being in the right seat, not missing instructional time or disrupting the learning environment for others who are then missing instructional time. Increasing the number of students receiving preschool. We've seen the data, it's very clear, preschool's good. We got to have more of it. So that's been something that has been verified, that access to preschool very much positively impacts performance in K-3. And then another root cause that has been verified is that there is a lack of diversity of staff within Des Moines Public Schools, and there's a challenge retaining staff of color. And so that needs to be an ongoing strategy that gets embedded into our long-range action planning. So these surfaced through our community conversations, through our staff conversations, and have been verified. From that, we are in the very early stages, but we've identified really kind of 4 key levers that we'll dive into an action plan around as a system. So equity, know that equity is not a separate lever, that runs through everything that we do. Implementation of a high quality curriculum, we've spent quite a bit of time on that, and we'll continue to do that. That data literacy balanced assessment system, continuing to build capacity in that area, access to grade level expectations, building our content knowledge of our teachers so that they feel equipped to teach at high levels. And then SEL through curriculum integration, and of course focusing on the adults. And I believe that surfaced in the last board meeting with Jake Troja. That was a concern that the board raised of what are we doing to support the adult SEL prior to jumping to students. So please know that all of those things around cultural proficiency, equity, culturally inclusive practices and materials, that really lives in that number 1. And so that will all be part of that as we unpack that into an actionable plan. This was something that we have been communicating with our school leaders, and actually formalized it today, that we will have 100% of schools implementing with integrity in the 2021 school year our curriculum, our new adoption. We've featured EL. We're seeing some really promising gains as a result of that, and some other work that's happening. And so it will not be kind of an opt-in starting next year. So all schools will be expected and supported in implementation. So through that EL content literacy block, we've talked about in this curriculum, what it's helping us do is it's helping us focus on integration of that social emotional learning that we know is so critical. All of our curriculum is built around social justice themes. It really helps us communicate who we are and what we're about on a regular basis with students. It ensures access to high quality grade level text and instruction. Our teachers don't have time to vet every single piece of text that they're selecting to use with kids. So this does that for them, and it takes it through a pretty rigorous screening process, and also looks at the cultural proficiency and relevance as those texts are being selected, which leads me to that next one. We have to make sure that the materials that we're putting in front of students reflect the students that we serve. And so this curriculum will help us do that. We need to make sure that there's scaffolds so that every single student, regardless of their grade level proficiency, is accessing core. And we've talked a lot about that. It seems like a no-brainer, but we still struggle logistically to how do we ensure every single student is getting what they deserve as part of their Tier 1. And then, importantly, honoring the work that has been underway and the work that has been done around Schools for Rigor. It's been a rigorous project, and it will continue to thrive through these new materials because kids want to team around really engaging topics. So as an example, we immersed in an example that dug into Frederick Douglass and different examples of slavery and what is it to be free and what is it not to be free, and those are the types of discussions that invite meaningful teams versus kind of a standard by standard approach that we've been taking in the past. So this will just layer on top and continue to enrich the experience that kids are getting in core. So with that, we'd like to discuss whatever it is the board wants to talk about.
Before we open up our conversation, may I have a motion and a second to approve item F1, monitoring report, all students third grade reading?
I'll move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion by Cody and a second by Caldwell Johnson. So now, is there any discussion, or does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, so in terms of the schools that have implemented, do what would you ballpark the percentage implementation is now?
Implementation for the EL curriculum,
Right.
say 85% that
It'd
are
be
in
much of a
some
lift to get up to.
Right.
are in some stage of implementation. As we talked about the last time, when it's an implementation year, so some people got off to the different starts. But yeah, I'd say 85%.
Okay, and then, yeah, related to that, I'm sure there's not some kind of survey data about how people like it, but what kind of conversation are you hearing about the curriculum?
It was a heavy lift to start, and I think that there's a lot of pieces to it. So as we've worked through some of that, the conversations are getting more and more positive. A couple of things that came up just today in talking with some principals. There was a principal that was sharing at her table with her principals that at first it was a little rough and the teachers weren't really sure about it. It was new. It was a lot of reading, a lot of prep work, but she said now, if today she went in and said, we're not going to use this anymore, she would have a revolt that would rival what I had in the fall. So she really felt like her teachers are seeing it. And the reason that the teachers are so adamant about using it, or that they feel so strongly about it, is how the students are reacting to it and how much the students are enjoying it. So I think that those schools, or I would say those classrooms and those teachers who have really dug in and kind of waded through the first part of it, are the ones that we're hearing a lot of positives about it, because they're seeing how their students are connecting to it. They're seeing how it's opening up spaces for students to have the conversations that we need them to have. Right? So yes, we're learning the standards, and we are definitely increasing in the amount of writing we're doing and the evidence that we are seeking in text and being able to speak about. But we're also opening up spaces for students to talk about injustices and social issues, and that is important as well to them. So I think they're seeing that.
So
as a positive.
so the relevant text is what they're engaging with and enjoying?
Yes.
And just the topics in general.
So the topics in the text. So, you think about finding a word, they talk about a worthy text, right? A text that students would want to go find information in, right? Or want to refer back to, or want to make connections to. And these texts are helping us do that. The students are enjoying them, they're enjoying the topics, they're enjoying the text, so they're wanting to get back into them.
No question. No.
Oh, just one more, and then I'll wrap it up here. So regarding those texts, you said you have access to diverse reading materials. Besides what's already in the curriculum, I mean, what kind of investment are we putting into other stuff, other books and and whatever?
Yeah, that's a good question. Right now, one of the projects that our equity coaches are working on with us in support of is what's missing. So we have these really rich texts in front of us, but are they diverse enough? So if that's the case, if they're not, then how do we supplement that? A lot of schools are contributing title dollars to supplement. We have supplemental texts that have been vetted and approved that we're providing them lists. So schools are slowly over time making those investments using title dollars, which is exactly what we want them using some of those dollars for.
And that group that meets monthly to talk about who may or may not be represented in the text that we have, they are looking for other texts, but they're also looking for resources, community resources, or other resources that we could bring in to fill some of those gaps.
Thank you.
Question. So what does the EL look like? Upper elementary compared to lower elementary? Because I've heard upper L teachers really like it. Lower L sometimes maybe the buy-in isn't quite there. Is that accurate statement?
I think that that might be school to school. I do feel like that the upper L's off the bat, like right out of the gate, had some really meaty and engaging topics and discussions that they could get into with their students, where the lower elementary, the K1 especially, didn't necessarily feel that connection with the topics, and the lower elementary does spend a good amount of time at the very beginning that works on routines and processes that pay off in the end. So with the topics that they're having now, I'm hearing a lot, hearing more positives about them as they're getting into it.
Can you give me an example? If you can't, you can give me later. An example of like a text, a lower L text that is used, or topic, or?
A topic? Well, they start out in kindergarten and first grade. The first topics that they get into are, one is about like school and your place in school, and the other is toys, and it gets into like toys and inventing toys and sharing toys, but using toys, all the things around toys. And at first, I think that it was thought that we were playing a lot, but as they got into it and reading about, inventing your own toy and making your toy and why, how do we use toys and how does that help our imagination, that helped us with some of that feelings about it. And I think going into next year, we can certainly add more to that one. But now they're talking about, in first grade, trees, right? And they're very excited about all the different kinds of trees, birds in first grade, birds, and that's super engaging, right? And they're really excited about it. And then they'll go into their next module and they'll talk about their community and how do we ensure that we protect the birds in our community and how birds help us. So I think they finding that more engaging. Does that answer your question? I can get you more information too if you.
Yeah, I just wondered, like, social justice wise, like, not that the little ones can't be advocates as well, but it's probably going to be different, right?
And I think it's helping them find those connections, right? So when you're talking about sharing, it can be bigger than just a sharing something, it's sharing in general. So we really have, on hindsight, and with this group that we meet with monthly around our equity team leaders that are meeting, we talked about that and how can we help them with some of those social emotional connections in those K1 in the first, because they're all in there, and we can pull out those CASEL competencies and really help make those connections for the teachers, but also pull in some of those rights, like, and responsibilities at the K1 level that we didn't do as good a job with going into it.
Thanks.
So we have some plans for that.
I have a couple questions. Looking at just the data with kindergarten, what is going on in kindergarten? It seems like those were huge jumps. When I'm looking at Black male of colors, it looks like the targets have already been met. Are there things that we have in place to just ensure that we don't go backwards when we're coming towards looking at the spring data?
Absolutely.
Okay, and I want to just echo again here, not that anybody has misspoken, but the targets were exceeded for winter, but it does not mean that we've met the target for spring.
Okay.
I just want to make that
Nope,
very
I got
clear
that.
because the bar goes
Right.
up as we go through the year. So because we've exceeded the target for winter does not mean that we've already exceeded the spring.
Right.
We still have work to do. Sorry, Kelly. Go ahead.
Yes, and I think that to that point, and we were talking today that we really celebrate this, but this has taken some focus and some effort, some tightening of routines and procedures in our classrooms during that foundational block, and we have to keep doing that. So rather than, and in talking with a group of principals today, rather than thinking about bringing more things in or changing, we stay the course. And really feeling like we are we're seeing that shift now. So let's stay the course, let's keep it tight, and keep those routines and procedures and that instructional practices that we put in place during that foundational block over the past 3 years. Let's keep that going.
And then looking at second grade, where I see that we didn't meet the target, but what are some plans? Are there some instructional strategies that you're seeing that may be being used at other grade levels that could be incorporated in second grade, or what are our plans for getting our second grade kiddos?
Yes. So second grade, the test changes, and we've and also we have historically sent our first graders into second, not really, with our percentages low of meeting that benchmark. So second grades had that catch up to do. So we have put some things in place from the winter, well, really from the fall, because we knew this was going to be an area of concern, of really getting some of those fluency practices in place to make sure that we're drilling down and seeing what the issue is, because this is a fluency test in second grade, and their progress monitoring on fluency, but it may be a decoding issue, it may be a phonemic awareness issue, so we've got to drill down. So we're really continuing to support schools. So again, not changing our message from follow our support, but doubling down and really supporting and helping schools drill down to individual students.
Yeah, and also we have some work to do in identifying, we've talked about this before, but identifying where do we need to be with a first grade student at the end of the year, because it needs to be higher than what success is currently benchmarked at on the FAST, because we know that there's that learning loss. So we probably need to have an internal benchmark at first grade that we're really shooting for, that ensures that they're coming into second grade with that momentum that they need to have to be on track. And we've relied on the FAST benchmarks before. That's not proving adequate for our population. So we're tracking that to see that we have the appropriate benchmark at first grade, so that when they're leaving first grade, assuming no summer intervention, they're coming in at the level that they need to be at second grade to stay on track through the year.
We also think our increase in writing in our younger grades, kindergarten, first and second, is going to help with that too, because it's reciprocal, right?
All right, thank you.
Just one quick question. One of the things with regards to looking at implementation of 100% of the schools will implement the EL curriculum, it also, you have some bullet points under there. One is Alliance to Schools of Rigor. Are all schools schools of rigor?
Not officially, but a majority of our schools have adopted many of the practices, but haven't been through the formal treatment, we called it.
Okay. Is it an important requirement that they complete that process, or
we have gotten to a point in our implementation where we feel like what we've learned through that process we can embed in all future work without having to go through this formal 2-year treatment. That part of the plan was always a handoff to the district to say, we don't actually have to call ourselves a school for rigor or check every box to say that we're doing this, this, and this, that these are good practices that we can embed as we go in all new learning, so that it doesn't become like this thing that lives over here, that it starts to become just how we do business. And so that's been our goal, is to start to fold in these things. And so as we're supporting implementation of EL, for example, we're explicitly pointing out, here's where teaming really lives, because that's really been the focus of the Schools for Rigor work, is teaming. What has been lacking, and this isn't a fault of Schools for Rigor, it's a curriculum issue, is we haven't had a lot of meaningful things to team around. And so now this is kind of bringing those two worlds together to say, kids want to team around social justice issues, they don't want to team around a standard, right? And so that's our work to do, so that it's not seen as separate.
Okay. Kind of a reporting question. Under progress measure for the percentage of students who are not meeting the benchmark but are being monitored, I'm curious, because we only report the data for fall and spring. Is there an opportunity to get winter, so we're aligning with those FAST scores as well?
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Our next report will have that. Because we just closed that winter testing window, we wouldn't have enough progress monitoring data points to really be meaningful. So that when we report again, our next report, that'll be a highlight, is that progress monitoring data.
Okay. I would also, if I could make a recommendation, I was disappointed that the presentation on the PowerPoint was not uploaded until last night, and I downloaded my reports over the weekend, and so I didn't have that, and I wasn't aware until I happened to look this afternoon that was uploaded. And part of that information that's in that PowerPoint presentation, I feel could be put in these reports, and maybe should be put in these reports as well. So I was just caught off guard that there was additional data that would have been helpful if I had it in the report when I was accessing that to read that. Right now, those are all the questions I have.
I just have a couple of quick questions. I'm going to go back to the cohort data that you mentioned. So help me understand how you're defining cohort. Is it individually tracked by year, or is it tracked by group as they move from grade to grade? So it's not necessarily the same kids.
This is not necessarily the same students, and we can pull better cohort data. I was just making a general cohort from these students that the data that we're seeing in third grade. If we go back to the second grade, we've seen some increase. So we can't ensure those are the same students.
Doesn't account for mobility.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. I just wanted to make sure that my understanding of cohort was correct.
Yeah,
Yes.
And
that's a good
my
question.
assumption was right. And then I also have a question about buildings that are lagging. And I know that we don't, get into the weeds at this table around what's happening in certain buildings, but I certainly know that across this districts, we have different needs based on the student demographics in buildings, which means that there could be buildings that are knocking it out of the park and buildings where we have either teachers and or kids that are lagging. So help me understand what the interventions are that we use when we clearly see that while as a group, in the aggregate, we're moving along nicely, when you begin to look at building level data, we have some challenges.
I can speak in general terms, but know that when a building gets identified as not making progress, it's a pretty customized plan based on what's lacking in that school. So I won't get too far in the weeds. But a few things that we have put in place or now are putting in place is, one, just like we have reporting out to you all on progress toward board goals, that should and will cascade down to schools. So this process needs to get all the way down to the building level to buildings are reporting out on their progress toward goals, and then we can emulate the exact same process. If you're not meeting your goals, why? What's happening? What do you need? What barriers do we need to remove? What additional resources can we allocate? So that process will be critically important, and it also just communicates what's important. If we care enough to monitor, we're going to make sure that that's where the energy goes. So that hasn't been in place and is getting put in place actually starting this month. The second thing is, as schools fail to keep up with the progress of the district, autonomy goes down. So that's where those customized plans come in. Not that we have all the answers either, but clearly what we're doing isn't working, so we need to put in more safeguards to say, results will set you free. We're not getting the results that we're seeing, so we're going to tighten up expectations. And the expectations are not out of line with what is being asked of everyone. It might just include increased monitoring, increased support of those said expectations.
I do know that we've had some reductions in Title I dollars too, so I have to assume that there's a net impact when there are fewer resources, especially in our high poverty, high need schools that are not available to address some of the needs of some of those students.
And I'm sorry to say, I'm glad you brought that up, but the board is already aware of this, but since we have a more public forum here, the Trump administration's provisional budget for next year in regards to education is a net 20% reduction in total education funding that would hit K-12, which primarily for DMPS is Title I, to a lesser extent Title III, which is our ELL funding. That's also going to be rolled into one big ball, if you will, for whatever reason. But the long and short of it is, we could easily expect to see another more significant reduction to DMPS next year to the tune of over $1.5 million, which certainly we'll revisit how we allocate our Title I funds. North High School is a Title I high school. All but 2 of our middle schools are Title I. Likely what we would, and we're currently working on this, and it's always a guessing game because we don't know what the final result will be. We don't know how the Senate and the House are going to respond to those proposals, but likely because our first 2 goals that we're talking about tonight are hugely important to the future of these kids, and that's being proficient readers at the end of 3rd grade. If need be, and we're already talking about the possibility of this, we may have fewer title dollars, fewer schools at the secondary level as Title I schools in Des Moines so that we can keep the focus where the highest priority is, which is frankly another gift that the board has given to the district, because we have we have much more clarity about what, where our resources need to be brought to bear. So the reduction in Title I that we received this year has been a challenge for sure, and has had an impact on these two goals in particular. But there's more in the offing if we aren't putting the appropriate pressure at the federal level, because while a very small percentage of our total resources comes from the federal level, we're highly reliant on the extra support that we provide for especially our youngest students, and a 20% reduction will not be without direct impact on our success towards these goals and the future of our students.
I don't have any other questions.
I want to follow up on some things that Heather and Kelly touched on, specifically with the implementation of the EL curriculum this year, and then implementation 100% with integrity next year. What I kind of want to understand is, so, for some schools, they've gone through this transition into schools for rigor. Not all have fully. A new curriculum this year. It's, to me, presents a challenge conceptually, just for a teacher to go through that process. In fact, I saw one of the booklets. You can't even have to take off the let, right? It's a book that the unit stuff that you have for so many lessons. How do you balance still of giving teachers the freedom, the license to teach the way that they know is effective to children, with new forms of instruction and a new curriculum? Can you talk on that, and especially with this idea that it'll be this curriculum be installed at 100% of our schools with integrity next year?
One of the reasons that we were attracted to this curriculum, and it's an open source, so it's not a vendor selling a product, which that appealed to me immediately, is that it's not a script. So when we think about old traditional curriculums, it was a basal program. It told the teacher exactly what to say, exactly what to do. We actually, we kind of rebranded it as this is a Thinkin' Teachers curriculum. So really what it is, it's more about building the teacher's understanding of how to approach instruction, how to introduce these meaty topics to students, how to scaffold, but it absolutely is not a script. So there are decisions that are still made in a moment-to-moment reality, but there are things such as text selection that are a non-negotiable, and we have strong evidence that when left to our own devices, sometimes we're lowering the expectations for students, even if our intentions are really positive. So there are non-negotiables that exist, and we've laid those out for schools, but I don't believe in any of those non-negotiables that it ties anyone's hands or strips them of their professional judgment to make those decisions. But the purpose of the materials is also to build our capacity of our teachers. So it's like embedded professional development, which is where the work lies in the preparation. We're addressing that through additional teacher time next year to honor that. But it's work. It's a lot of work to prep for lessons. As they build their capacity, it will get easier over time, certainly.
But there are a lot of daily decisions that have to be made by teachers, and in the moment decisions that they still have to make, right? As a teacher, knowing their class and knowing where they are and where they need to get them to, it takes still a lot of teacher moves to make that happen.
So the next two things I was going to make a request and then make a point, and I realize as you're speaking that they're really connected, and that is that from time to time in my years on the board, I've felt compelled to try and provide you all the encouragement to stay the course with the things that you're trying to do, to not feel compelled to come to the board with a shiny new object to show evidence of potential for change. And I'm thinking now, you know, it's fascinating being in this position and getting these progress monitoring reports and you know, sitting in the chair the first time that we got it and recognizing that was baseline data for something that we were going to be doing for the next 4 years. And now being in an entirely different position of now reacting to the first report that shows you know, how we're doing relative to, you know, the prior report. I was thinking on this while I was gone, and before I had seen this, and honestly was as much anticipating seeing numbers not meet benchmark as surpassing it, just because it's public education and there's nothing we can do to, there's only so much we can do to control outcomes. And trying to kind of think through what the proper reaction would be for me, report to report, 4 different reports a year. And I can't say that I found a proper frame on this yet. And I think as a board, we're going to go through that process over the next couple of years. But I do hope, I think, as much for the sake of the folks who are implementing this in the buildings, that there's some fidelity to what we're doing, and that we stay consistent with it. Because you mentioned it, and that's been my perception too. The little that I understand of what happens in our classroom is that it's a big lift to take on a whole new curriculum, and that this particular curriculum has a lot to it, and a lot of reading, a lot of preparation, and a lot that's asked of folks who have been teaching a certain way in the years prior. And so I'm speaking to you all, and I'm also speaking to my colleagues as we have our third report on these two board goals, and then our fourth, and then we get into the next year. We're going to continue to react to this information. I'm not sure how that reaction is going to look when we're not meeting a goal, but I do hope that we're cognizant at least of the impact that our reaction has or could have down the chain of command.
Thank you for saying that. And I think a concrete example of that is we are chomping at the bit to also adopt for math, knowing that our math is not anywhere close to where we want it to be, but we also have to be cognizant of, like, our teachers can only take on so much at once. Yeah. So that's the perfect, I guess, to your point. Mm-hmm. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Do you have one more question?
Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So you mentioned that it takes a lot of prep time outside of the school day, or how are we supporting teachers implementing this? You know, how much plan time do they get? I know an elementary teacher does not get plan time.
Right. There's never enough time, certainly.
Right.
So one of the things that we've done is we've taken a significant portion of our professional development days where we have released students, and we've recycled a lot of that building-directed time into teacher-directed time for explicitly to support more time to prepare and execute this new curriculum. Mm-hmm. So we're also anticipating with kind of more an embedded approach and less just standalone schools for rigor training, that more even of the school-directed time will be support and time for PLCs to work together with this new material to support implementation. So we've heard it loud and clear, and we've responded accordingly as much as we can that's within our sphere. Mm-hmm.
Okay. There were a couple of times where you mentioned just, you know, some different things, and so I want to make sure my understanding of some of those terms are the same. So when you say vetted and approved supplemental materials, can you walk me through that process?
The vetting that...
The process for the supplemental materials or for the texts that are chosen?
Well, the texts that are chosen come out of your curriculum. I want to know about the supplemental, like you had said that you provide a list of things that, you know, might be a good starting place if teachers were looking for supplemental materials.
Thank you.
So
Yeah.
what was the process to vet and approve and add
So
things to that list?
EL has a set of texts for supplemental materials that can be purchased. That's why we're talking through the Title I dollars, or some people have had, their PTA and different ways to purchase the text. Those are vetted in the same way that the texts for the curriculum are. So they go through the same rubric process that.
Okay, so that's not something happening internally
No,
then? Okay,
no.
that was
No,
was what the question was.
But we are providing some resources to teachers, like the teacher group that's come together, or coaches have gotten together and kind of put things out. And we are vetting them in the way that they help enhance the curriculum, because it's a this and rather than we're not supplanting it
Substituting, yeah.
or substituting it. It could layer on.
Right.
top.
Okay, because I think you had also mentioned something about an open source curriculum. You had called it open source. Can you explain to me what that means in terms of this curriculum? I'm just thinking that probably means something different from me coming from a library world of an open.
Yeah, open source is kind of the new way forward with curriculum. So vendors there are vendors who continue to put out products, but open source, so EL, for example, is one curriculum that's open source, being that it's been designed by typically a group of nonprofits where they create this curriculum, they field test it, they do all the same research behind it, but it's free and it's accessible to anyone who wants it. The cost
So it's an
is
open
in-
education resource. then,
Yes,
it's
the
no
cost
ER.
is in the
Okay.
purchase of the books and the professional development for teachers.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
It's open education resource would be the synonymous.
Yeah.
Yep. That's.
Sorry, I could have just used that and saved a few minutes.
I mean, that would have helped me. I don't know if that would have helped anyone else, but so when we were talking about like who's represented and not represented in curriculum, and we've got these supplemental materials, can you walk me through what is the role of a student's individual choice and free reading within this curriculum and within our implementation? Because you said we've upped the amount of reading and writing as part of the curriculum, and so what does the time or the choice look like for kids to just pick a book they want to read?
Sure.
What does that look like?
That's still available in the class time. There's like our 3-5 have an all block, and it has a component in that all block called AIR. So sometimes it's researching the topic. Other weeks it's picking your own book that you'd like to read. There's always time in that as they finish up to pick books from their classroom library that they want to, or their library to read. And K2 also has times like that the students are just reading, and so they could be reading choice.
Wide reading.
Yeah.
Can you walk me through like a tip? If I'm a student, how many minutes am I spending, doing literacy in a week or a day? How much of that is, teacher directed? Am I in small groups? Am I working by myself? Am I getting a chance to read or research what I want to dig into? Like, what does that kind of look like? And I know it'll look different for K2 than 3-5. So I'm just curious about what that looks like.
If we look at our 3-5 day, both K2 and 3-5, they have an hour of foundational in their schedule. So in K2, we call that the foundational block. In 3-5, we call it the all block, because it includes grammar and free read and research and teacher, small group, teacher-directed lessons. So they have that. And then they each, K5, have an hour of content literacy. And that is where we use the EL curriculum. It's built around a topic, and they're learning, using multiple texts, multiple types of media to learn around that topic. Within that, now it may be a topic, but if you get into classrooms, you see some choice in that topic. Like students may really want to take off and learn about one part of that, and I know teachers are providing resources for them to do that, or finding resources for them if they don't have those. So there's some choice within the topic. For the students to read. Then many schools have what they call a win time, or a intervention, enrichment, maintenance time, and students will be receiving. So they're not pulled out of their core instruction. They have these times set in their schedule so that they can get some intervention or backfilling if they need that in math, reading, or they might get enrichment during that time if that's what they need. So that could be literacy as well. And then most classrooms have some periods. Some of those many classrooms have a period, if you have a few minutes between things, that they have students able to have choice and pick out their books. So literacy is, reading overall is encouraged, and we certainly want students to be able to read the things that they want to read. But we know through research that building strong content knowledge around topics is what's going to help them be better readers, right? So we want to give that time that's focused around a topic, so that they're building that understanding around topics as well, or content.
That makes sense. I guess my question kind of gets to the heart of, like, are there unintended consequences by focusing incredibly on this? And, there's a lot of research about literacy and, like, what helps kids read, and there's supporting that, more free choice helps support that more, like, what you're talking about, the content knowledge helps support it across the board. And so it was really just, are there other types of things that, the board needs to be aware of in terms of, unintended consequences because of, you had mentioned that we're focusing so heavily on literacy. I know that means that there are other things that fall to the wayside. So is there anything that you think needs to be raised up for the board that we should be aware of in terms of just, unintended consequences or?
Not yet.
Okay, great. And then the last question just kind of gets at, like, what can the board do to help? Are there any, like, policies or anything that the board should be looking at as we move forward that can help to support the work that you're continuing to do for our kids?
I think one thing I just want to thank you for is continuing to ask that question and how budgets are changed based on these board goals, because that empowers us to dream big, to get these things to happen, right? So I don't in this school feel limited necessarily within the sphere, but limited in what I could ask for. I may not get it, but I feel like the board's supporting that. And so the questions like that really help us not limit our own thinking as to what we could do or strategies that we could have. So I appreciate that.
I would like to lift up just the point that Terry raised earlier. The Title I is negatively impacting us this year. Now, our staff is phenomenal at rolling with the punches and not making it appear as though anything is different from last year, but it is. It absolutely is. Now, projecting forward to next year, and I'm not saying this is what's going to happen, and I'm a little bit reticent to lift this up, but I do think it helps illustrate where the board really can be a force to ensure that we're successful in these goals. Not an unlikely scenario next year is, and I without going through all of the calculus that it takes to create a Title I budget, one of the things is that you need to have a viable program in any school that is receiving Title I dollars, which means, in essence, we have to have a certain level of investment at any school that we call Title I. One of the things that we can do, however, is say that on a per pupil basis, we're going to invest this much at each elementary school and not quite as much at each middle school, and maybe even a little bit less at high school. But that's a per pupil basis, right? So if you have a high school of 1,300 students, any dollar amount on a per pupil basis spread over 1,300 students rather than 300 or 400 students at elementary level, you can quickly see that any high school that's designated as Title I, if that were no longer designated Title I, you might be able to fund 2 or 3 elementary schools, right? So if it were to happen that we get a significant, and significant really is an understatement if it's a 20% reduction, when you see a high school no longer being funded at Title I, the board understanding of why that decision is made is very helpful. Because we saw earlier tonight a lot of drama about a position that was not a reduction and was really never an issue last year versus, or this year versus next year. But people are good at playing cards to advocate for certain perspectives. And I can promise you that me and my team are level set at ensuring, number one, that we're serving every single student that's enrolled in Des Moines Public Schools, and a very close second, ensuring that our SMART goals are being aggressively pursued and that we're successful on those. And there's lots of different ways to skin a cat, as they say, and there's lots of different stories to tell. And so for the board to be, very clear that resources are at a premium, and when changes are made at the federal or the state level, there are very difficult decisions that we need to make to ensure that we're leveraging those resources in the service of all 33,000 students, and then a very close second to ensuring that we're aggressively pursuing the SMART goals that the board has approved. So always keeping that as a filter in your thinking about, what rolls through your phone messages and your email messages, because I know at different points in the year, you're flooded, and a lot of times those are messages that are well-intended but ill-informed, and making sure that filter is in place.
And another part of this question is just, reminding staff that if there are policy changes at any point that, you're talking to Dr. Ahart about those, and we're bringing those forward to have those conversations at the board table. So if there are ways that the board can support you with further policy or whatever that conversation looks like, that we want to make sure that we're doing all that we can to support these goals that we've set, that you're working so hard on. So does any other board members have any questions or discussion on this item? Okay, then we have a motion and a second. We had a motion by Cody and a second by Caldwell Johnson to approve F1, this monitoring report. So go ahead and please vote.
Thank you, too.
All right, motion passes 7-0. The next item on our agenda is item F2, the monitoring report for black males, third grade reading. They combined them. So do we need to vote a second time? Okay, then we've approved both with a 7-0. Great. We have no information-only items on our agenda this evening. Next on our agenda is items of privilege. I don't have anything to share. Do any other board members have any comments or items to share? Duana, go ahead.
Won't take too much time. Just some things that have kind of crossed emails or communications, but wanted to congratulate the speech and debate team at Roosevelt. They had 7 qualifiers that are going to nationals. There is the district science and engineering fair going on right now. So congratulations to those who are involved with that. And I just wanted to thank staff, students, and community for continuing to reach out to us. I know that sometimes we get inundated with a lot of voices, but I want to continue to urge people to utilize their voices. And then on a personal note, I would just like to thank the board and the staff in the district for your encouraging words, your support for me during these last few weeks for the things that my family has gone through. So I just want to say thank you. I greatly appreciate it for you all giving me some time to just grieve a little bit. And now I'm back into the swing of things. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other board members? Yeah. Go ahead, Mr. Brand.
Yeah, if you don't mind, there's 2 things I want to say. One is I'm looking forward, and this board does a very good job, I think, of getting around and visiting schools and spending time in buildings, and I've tried to uphold my part of the bargain. And this year I'm trying to go to places we're not typically at. So I'm looking forward to, with Tom's help, serving breakfast at one of our elementary schools, going to Central Nutrition to prepare lunch, and then serving lunch at one of our secondary schools on Friday, and learning a little bit more, but also on behalf of the board, showing, I think, that we care about those staff as just as much as we do the folks that are in this room or that we see in classrooms. And the other thing is, it could have been comments that I would have shared at the when we did the consent agenda, but relative to what we're the choice made on Scavo, but really beyond that, just I've had in my mind, and I shared this with Tom last week on a phone call. I think I thought about Scavo, and I thought about one of the comments that I think probably all heard from folks that reached out to us about the small environment, the personal nature those classrooms, and it wasn't a big leap for me to go back to this fall when we were hearing a lot about class sizes in our high schools, and it just got me thinking that at some point in time, as this board or the next board is faced with and has an opportunity to think about the future 10 years out for this district, we need to be mindful and willing to have a conversation about whether our high schools are too large, all of our high schools. And I just want to lay that out there right now, because I know it's helpful to sometimes hear these thoughts and for Tom to be aware that there's at least one board member who's thinking this way, because they're not necessarily typical thoughts, and maybe something that can spur some conversation down the line.
So yeah, sort of related to that. Over the last several weeks, I've had a chance to go to the Flex Academies at North and East. I had a chance to visit Scavo for a morning, and I was massively impressed by everything I saw at all three places. One reason I voted to transition Scavo to a program rather than a comprehensive high school is that I saw how powerful the North and East programs were. I am confident the kids at Scavo, the kids who choose to go there in the future, whatever, their needs will be met if they reach the same heights as North and East. Another reason that I made the vote that I did was because our middle schools and high schools are woefully understaffed in terms of support staff. This is one way we can help alleviate that a little bit. It's not going to cure everything, but this can be a step in the right direction. And my baby brought a disease home, so I'm sorry I've got the scratch in my throat.
I was just gonna say, I appreciate all of those comments, Board. Kaylin, I know that you and I had that conversation about support staff, so I want to make sure that I echo that as well, because we were in agreement when we talked over the weekend. So Terry, did you have something else as well?
No, I was just going to echo something that I think we all received via email, and then one of the students from Roosevelt brought it up this evening, but I definitely want to make sure that the family and friends of Abdi Sharif know that this board certainly hopes to bring that to closure in a positive way, but oftentimes we don't really get to talk about those things that are very personal to our families and to our students at this table. And so I didn't want anybody to think that we were not sensitive to that, but oftentimes it's just not, in the course of doing our work, something that comes up, and maybe it should be. So I wanted to make sure that we acknowledge that this evening.
Yeah, and maybe that's a conversation the board can have around how do we continue to engage with our community around those issues that are incredibly personal to our families and our buildings, because I think, you know, when you're a new board member, you look at this process and it feels incredibly inflexible, and then once you dig into this work, you realize how much power the board really has over the way in which we go about doing our work. And so if figuring out a way by which we acknowledge or, you know, discuss those types of things that are going on in our community is of interest to the board, I think that it's within our purview to figure out a way to make that work into our process. So if board members have no further comments, I'll turn it over to Dr. Ahart for the superintendent's report.
There we go. Now I'm on. I just wanted to recognize the board again. You know, I can tell you that for me and for what has now become an extended cabinet group this year, we did that by design, in large part to make sure that we have all of the voices necessary at the table to make sure that we're bending the organization toward what the board has now very clearly defined as priorities. But the feeling moving into board meetings for me and my team is very different. I won't say it's more comfortable, but I will say it's more focused. And I think bending the whole, you know, culture and resources of the district toward identified priorities, which is a very powerful place to be, and a place I would say that there's very few places in the country, in districts much smaller than ours and much larger than ours, that can say that. So I think that's a real tribute to the leadership of this board. And secondly, I just want to, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but in regards to the, we had many speakers speaking to Roosevelt tonight. I want to make very clear that there was not a budget reduction involved in that decision. There may have been some confusion between administration and staff there. I can tell you that having spent 11 years as a high school language arts and primarily a drama teacher, having spent most of my day today at an elementary school and the day at the arts, speaking to early elementary and middle elementary kids about drama and acting, and having started the turnaround arts in the northeast portion of our district, and frankly, talking about every year as budgets get tighter and tighter, do we continue to make that investment in turnaround arts? I can say that if you look at the district over the past 8 years, actually I should say 10 years now, including next year, with record low supplemental state aid, if you look at how we're supporting arts as a district, there's no argument to be made logically that arts are first on the chopping block. I know that when you're experiencing that, and perhaps the loss of a teacher that you greatly admire, I greatly admire Mr. Davenport as well, it's easy to reach that conclusion, but that argument just cannot be made. The arts are hugely important, and one of our student speakers spoke to how there's evidence that our students who are involved in the arts do better on standardized tests. While that's true, that is true, I've lectured our arts teachers on more than one occasion that is not why it's an important investment. It's an important investment because our kids need to know who they are. They need to be able to express themselves, not the voice of someone else. And the best way to get to that and to honor all of our kids, no matter where they come from, no matter what language they speak, no matter where their natural aptitudes are, is through the arts. And I will, as a superintendent, continue to support that. I would love to be able to do a lot more. The resources just aren't there. But I appreciate the passion, and I appreciate what Ms. Bradley said. We need to continue to have all of our voices at the table, including our students. But it's really important that everybody is making well-informed arguments so that the energy that they're putting forward to make changes in the system is directed where it needs to be directed so that we get the resources that we need to do what we need to do. Because I can tell you that around this table, there are 8 individuals, and I'm going to include Aaron to 9, who are fierce advocates for our kids. And decisions are not made lightly. The Mr. Davenport situation is a unique situation, and there was miscommunication. We can go on and on about that, but the net result is there's not a cut in the arts at Roosevelt this year. An argument could be made that we should, and certainly those arguments are being made, but that is not the reality. Our kids are very important, and the arts, regardless of what impact they may or may not have on standardized test scores, are important in and of themselves because that's what makes us human. That's what helps our students be creative. It's what helps our students express themselves no matter what their passion, whether they're going to go on to be engineers or mathematicians or teachers or administrators or plumbers or electricians or musicians or actors. What they learn in the arts is no less important regardless of what it is that they pursue. So I just want to make sure that people are very clear. I'm a huge proponent of the arts, not because it helps us have better math and reading scores. That's important, but it's important because it's really what makes us human. And we'll continue to advocate for supporting the arts and expanding the arts, as well as supporting our kids in what's been identified as our SMART goals. So I will let that go at that.
Thank you. The meeting is adjourned, and our work session will begin at, we'll see how quick we can start. I'm hoping like 7:30, 7:35?
Yeah, we'll say 7 minutes.
Sooner.
Okay, sounds good.
7:25.